Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our round 2 of Writing Your Center's Breastfeeding Policy. Please join our class for the very first one, and this is the second one. So we'll be going over several different layers of writing policies in 1, 2, and several other ideas of policy writing. So please join us for this one and work with Kathleen Anderson and Love Anderson from Breastfeeding Family Friendly Childcare and Communities. I'll let you guys take it away.
Thank you so much, Natasha. So we were in the process of writing a breastfeeding friendly policy, and we started talking about the North Carolina designation and how to write a policy that's going to meet all the expectations of the designation. And Kathleen and I, in the previous video, you will see us referring to the 10 steps to breastfeeding friendly childcare. And I just wanted to go ahead and put up the slides of the 10 steps. And right now we're focusing on writing a policy, but we're integrating all 10 steps. And so if you remember, we pulled from the designation from the North Carolina application, and we found what the requirements are from the state, but we found that this document you couldn't actually type on. So we typed up all the questions, and we were over here on this other screen actually writing and filling in part by part. So we were on the counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fifth bullet down. And we were looking at supports and promotes appropriate introduction of solid foods with continued breastfeeding for 1 year or longer as desired by a family, as recommended by the Academy of Pediatrics. So we're talking to childcare providers about, how does this work in your policy? Kathleen, did you have any thoughts? I want you to be able to chime in here.
This is really a carry taking you to the next step. So the bullet before this step spoke about exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months and how that looks in your program, in your childcare program. Do you promote exclusive breastfeeding, which would mean for the first 6 months, infants receive only human milk, no infant formula, no water, juice, or solid food. So this next step, or this next bullet, is sort of a carryover that you support and promote the appropriate introduction of solid foods with continued breastfeeding for 1 year or longer, and as desired by the family. And that is the recommendation by the American Academy of Pediatrics. It isn't that we stop at a year, but that we're going to that the AAP recommends 1 year or longer and speaks to the desire of the family. And I think that's where we as childcare providers can put, that's where we have this great place to be, is we can support the family to continue to breastfeed, providing that support beyond the 6 months. And I think it's such a great place for us to be. But it is an extension of the training that that you're getting already as far as step 2. And that's why I would like to tuck that in there, Lo, because that's also that you are trained on age-appropriate infant feeding practices, which includes the appropriate introduction of solid foods at the middle of the first year.
So we've already tucked in parts of step 2 previously, and I was wondering if we could put in a little bit different language. I'm going to make some suggestions, and maybe you could modify it. Let me see if that worked. And so, what do you think? What do you think about these? And feel free to delete anything that you feel like we've already said in the previous session. But I'm feeling like it's really nice to talk about sensitivity to meet the needs of breastfeeding families, and to talk about, again, we've already touched previously on promoting exclusive breastfeeding, but it's nice to say that one more time maybe, and then how the child care center promotes and supports foods in the AAP. But do you feel like maybe just, do you feel like we should delete? Does this look good?
I think it looks good. Let's add that one little bit about appropriate I can tuck that in, love, if that's okay.
Go
Do
ahead.
you mind? Is that all right? I'm just going to tuck it in. The idea of age appropriate infant feeding. That's part of our training, and the training would involve more than or beyond exclusive breastfeeding to what Love is showing here about the sensitivity to the needs of the family. Because if we're supporting the family to continue to breastfeed while introducing solids, I think that is, I think sensitivity to the needs of the breastfeeding family is a great place to put it. So I think it's all good. Learning about age appropriate infant feeding practices. We train our staff, as well as how we can show sensitivity to the needs of our families.
Mhm.
Good. And if we want, we can repeat the exclusive breastfeeding, or we can move that up to the one above.
I think you feel free to use your judgment here. I feel like let's delete.
Okay, because we do say that. And so, but we're looking at that, we're tweaking it now, right? We're going beyond. And then again, that's exactly what we talked about, the supporting and promoting the age appropriate. And so I'm going to pop take this part out, because it's actually what we just said, right?
Yeah.
So now you have some nice phrases to think about. That you train your staff on the development appropriate introduction of solid foods, and you share that information with the family. This also goes into our infant feeding plan. I think that from the 10 steps where we talk about it, the way you're working with your families to bring nutritionally complementary foods, not supplement, but complement the breast milk. So I think that's great. Yeah.
All right. So I think every childcare center, that these are just some really interesting points to be able to look at and modify for the needs of one's own specific childcare center.
And
Okay.
and I can I pop
Go
in
ahead.
step 8? Do you mind if I pop
No,
that
not at all.
information here? Because step 8 to me speaks to actually to both this bullet and the bullet before it, that you're supporting best practice, and how we support best. This is one of the ways that we support best practice. That sound okay?
Yeah. And
And this is all about the feeding plan. Go ahead.
And I think it's really nice here. I love how you just popped it straight in, and thinking about how we'd modify it to say Beacon Child Care Center or Anderson Child Care Center ensures that each feeding has that each infant has a feeding plan that supports best feeding practices. And Kathleen, and you go ahead and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we could just say here that we or our child care center develops a written breastfeeding plan with each family in our center, and just change this language to meet the needs of your center.
So looking before that, so that the bullet before that, we did keep where it came from, so that when you're looking at this now, you can say, oh, that's right, that those words came from step 2, or those words came from step 5. It's nice to have to know where they came from, but then modify that sentence to be, our staff and families are trained on the promoting appropriate introduction of solid foods. Our staff, we at Beacon Child Development Center or at Anderson Child Development Center show sensitivity to the needs of families. So it becomes more a more paragraph. What we're giving you are some language. In fact, you can see there are lots of dots, and some of the ones that Love Point popped in there because they aren't really complete sentences, because it really matters what you are doing. And you're always thinking about how are we doing that? Not just that, yeah, we support it, but how do we support it? Well, we train, and then we coordinate with the family, and we give the family information on age appropriate feeding practices. We do all these, how we do it, I think is important to add in there too. And that's all that. When it says step 8, you wouldn't need to put that in your language, in your actual policy, but it helps you as you're writing this to become something tangible. Oh yeah, that's right, I remember where that comes from. So yes,
But so how basically to take each one of these bullets and it say exactly how you just add some details about your specific childcare center. I love it. I'm going to give Kathleen a second to finish up. And I'm thinking the next bullet is maintain current individual infant feeding plans with support practices that include recognizing and responding appropriately to infant feeding cues, following paced bottle feeding practices, ensuring that active family early education coordinator of infant feeding to support lactation goals. So I think this is the question, and for those of you who are able to join us with Jen, but we would have said, well, how do you do each one of these things? We really would have expanded upon each one of these feeding cues.
Right, and that's part of training. We have to be aware of it, what infant feeding cues look like, and then to be able to respond to it, we have to know that that is a feeding cue or could potentially be a feeding cue. Right.
Do you think we missed any additions there for that section?
We maintain the infant feeding plan and we train to understand what's appropriate. I think those are the important things. And if you talked about those, I think that's good. Base bottle feeding practices. Did you want to move to that one?
Sure.
Because I know in a way these bullets are very similar here, right? The infant feeding practices. Now we're talking about the infant feeding plan. And we've been talking about similar things all the way through here. So how you recognize and respond appropriately to infant feeding cues, how you use paced bottle feeding practices, and you coordinate with the family. I think that in some ways it's similar language for all three, but you want to make sure you explicitly use the language. We maintain current individual infant feeding plans which support breastfeeding practices. And this includes those check marked areas, because you may be doing it all, but you want to make sure that if you're going for the designation, that the designation, the reviewers understand that you are doing all this, you are getting training on this, and this is more practice. Have I confused things, love? I'm sorry.
Not at all. I think so. I heard you talk about how we want to talk about how you maintain your current feeding plans and make sure to explicitly mention paced bottle feeding and actively refer families. So I just kind of reworked the sentence a little bit here. Does that look good? Do you want to change it? Or we could even
maybe change one little word. If I'm writing this about me, I'm going to say, we train our staff on. Does that sound okay, love?
Mm-hmm.
We train our staff.
Okay.
But all these are important considerations. And so if we're looking at how we are breastfeeding friendly childcare, this is where these are all the components when it comes to infant feeding, as well as how we're introducing solid food and what the solid food, how it relates to the human milk that you're still feeding the baby from the parent, and how they complement, how that solid food complements.
Well, so this is my question for you. So we started with this whole bullet point list, and I'm going, we finished part one. Woo! Yay! Sorry, when I'm writing my policy. Would you want to introduce this section with any kind of sentence or beginning statement, anything to go with? I'm going way back up to part one. It says, number one, clearly state that your program, does all of these things that we do. How do you think that you would want to handle this when you're writing a policy?
So I have a couple of ideas. So I'm going to pop them in for you at the very top. One of them relates to the question that they actually asked in the application. They say, remember, does your policy have the name of your program? So you want to start with, and we were talking with Jen from Beacon Child Development Center for the first half. So I had written this with that program in mind. And then some kind of introduction. You can add the language that works best with your families. And so I put some words in that may seem new to you, but they are words that are being used in different communities for breastfeeding. But you can just say, we recognize the importance of breastfeeding and human milk feeding because you are feeding the human milk for that the family distributes or gives you for optimal health and of the children in the family, of the child in the family. So that's one idea. You could put something in there that the purpose, then what is the purpose of your breastfeeding policy is to ensure that we welcome, encourage, and support our families so that they can continue to breastfeed. So what do you think of those terms, Love? How does that sound?
I mean, my first reaction always is when we pull out mother. I mean, I'm a mom. My kids call me mom. I get called mom all day long, and I feel really passionate about that. But when I see you write the word family, I go, oh yeah. I mean, I count a lot on the support from my family, and I like the idea that you would be engaging everyone in my family. I mean, today I had to call on grandpa to go pick up one of my children from childcare, and it really is about making sure that for our family, that our whole family is involved in this process. And I love the idea that a family can be just one mom and one baby, or it can be, grandma, grandpa, aunts, uncles, whoever lives in your house. I see a lot of power in the word family. So I like it. But I think it is important to reflect the culture of your childcare center and your community.
And you can put mother in there for sure. Yes. You may be more comfortable with parent. And what you are using in other policies, I think, are important. Keep the language similar to your other policy statements.
Oh, so if that's a really good point. If other places in our policy we say parents or families and we don't just use that one gendered term, it would add a lot of uniformity when you're writing your policy. So it's the same language over and over. That
But
would actually make a lot of sense.
yeah, and I was just thinking because we don't know what everyone looks to, but you can put a statement in that your center recognizes the importance of breastfeeding. I think that that helps all staff and families alike to know why this is a policy for you, and then what's the purpose. And for me, the goal is to ensure that we provide a welcome, that we provide encouragement, that we provide support.
And so would you go in here and delete the starts here and turn these into paragraphs?
Yes, I think so. Okay. Probably. I think that's a great idea, Love. Let's take out starting here because that's where we started in the other one. Yeah. So, all right. Now, Love, you had mentioned that you would like to put some things in about the basis for this. So would you like to put in the rules for NCDCDEE or not?
Oh, right here at the very top? Mm-hmm. Let's pop them in. I mean, I never want to miss out on getting the designation because I left something out.
Well, right. That's a good. I was thinking of that. It doesn't explicitly say that, but here you also are recognizing and perhaps giving a rationale for it that you're fully compliant with state and requirements and laws. And we put the wording for the state law here. And in the beginning, we actually talked about some of the nuances of this a breastfeeding friendly childcare is how important it is to welcome breastfeeding in our centers. And then this is the DCDEE the rules at this time regarding the accommodations that we make. So that's all part of it, and that's going to be part of your policy as well, that these are the things that we follow.
And so right here, would you pull out the required topics for a written breastfeeding policy are limited to? Would you just start with Beacon Child Development Center welcomes families as the next paragraph? Or would you want to take all those bullets and explicitly write them out?
I think you can do either way, whatever looks and feels best for you. We might want to say something that, so we could say something like at our Child Development Center. We can even change the term so that it's more universal at this point. And then you could have a we, right? And that we welcome. Then you could say, we welcome breastfeeding families and not have a bullet perhaps. or keep the bullet if you want people to know specifically.
Cool.
That we support families to continue to breastfeed. We provide appropriate breastfeeding friendly and human milk storage space. You can this way you have the wording that is required, but it also gives you a chance to personalize it with our childless
Well,
center at
I
our
love I love that. I mean, I love taking each one of these and just leaving the bullets because I'm thinking it's all about for me passing that designation. And I love that the bullets would help the reviewers to know you've got all the pieces.
And it helps you too to remember that these are important components to a breastfeeding friendly policy and a breastfeeding friendly childcare.
Perfect.
The rest that where they hang over the left side there, you can put them into more in paragraphs that line up a little bit better. What we can do is put this template, if you will, into a Google Doc. That would be something you will receive, and then you start filling it in, just as we filled it in here, with the information for all these different bullets.
All right. Perfect.
Okay.
Okay. So I
That's
don't want to
sounding
spend
good?
all of our time formatting, but I've thought we've got part one done. What does that look like? And we can go back and finish formatting this at the end, but I feel like we've got a good start.
Mhm.
So let's go down to part two. Describe the following: the health benefits of breastfeeding for the child, the breastfeeding parent, and the family. So I immediately wanted to break that up: child, parent, family.
Okay, we'll just do this, and then we'll fill it in and come back and make it look pretty.
Yeah, because I was
Awesome.
like, we never want to leave out the part. So what do you think, Kathleen?
Mhm.
Breastfeeding benefit for the child? Do you have a thought?
Well, we definitely want to start with the nutritional needs are met. And I think really one of the benefits besides nutrition is the idea that upper respiratory, it provides protection against upper respiratory illnesses and ear infections. And gastrointestinal or diarrhea, all those things that you might see with an infant in the center. And I think, right now we're recording this during COVID. So that is also something we're always thinking about. How can we keep our children healthy? But it's not the only respiratory virus that is out there. And we want to give children the best start. So those are the things that I would think about as far as if I were looking
Respiratory.
at benefits.
Mhm. And one of the places that when I do this, people think I'm silly, but I love the encyclopedia. I always think I'm like, I want to say something that's common knowledge that it's not going to be too detailed. So I'm a big fan of, I would probably just click over to Wikipedia and type in the word breastfeeding and see what they list as the top results.
Right.
Because it doesn't have to be anything, we just want it to be the basics.
Right. And I'm popping some of these in, but you can look up. I would definitely do that. What are the benefits? And think about some of the benefits, especially right there in your in it, that'll be benefiting your child. Right there in the center.
So what about the parents? I immediately I keep hearing that for families that have a breastfeeding infant, they miss 10 fewer days of work, and that's true for, it's said on their moms and dads, which was really surprising to me.
So miss fewer days of work. We could put that in both places then,
Mm-hmm.
for the family and the parent. And there are some, but it's interesting because there are some actual physical benefits for the person, the breastfeeding parent. So, for instance, breast cancer and ovarian cancers, there's a reduced risk. So that is all part of being able to breastfeed, is helping to support that parent to stay healthy. So I could pop those in.
Yes, I heard it even, there's doing research about it supporting the heart health of the breastfeeding parent.
I think breast and I think it's ovarian cancer, and reduce risk of cardiovascular disease. They call it. Yes, heart disease. That's fairly new. Last couple of years. But in a general sense, there are other things too. And these are not necessarily benefits you're physically, but you're right. You're still missing fewer days of work. You may be, your child will be healthier. So your family may be healthier.
Well, and the other one I think that's, to me, the number one thing for a child care provider is you're supporting the goals of the parent, like what the parent wants. And I think that's huge. Oh, you're putting under families.
I'll put it in there. I just realized I'm putting
The
the wrong
goals
place
of the
already.
family. No, I think that's great because, sometimes meeting those needs can be as important to the support parent as it is to the breastfeeding parent.
And I don't know if there are data on this, but I will say, and this is not something you're required to do, but if the child is not going to have a lot of these illnesses that are more common with children, it gives for safer staff at your child care center too. Doesn't have to be put here, but it's just something to think about for yourself, that it all works together. Sorry, love, didn't mean to get off my
Yes,
soapbox here.
absolutely. Perfect. And so how staff and family are trained in appropriate storage and label and preparation of human milk for feeding. I think we've talked about this a couple times.
Many times.
Yeah. I almost feel like, could we just leave it and say, we talked about this above?
You can. I think they are looking for descriptions of the followings. So how staff are trained. So in this case, I would look at that we provide regular training to support families. Maybe, and I'm going to pop these in, and this is something from one of the centers in Durham that used this. So they said our staff received regular training and support breastfeeding. At the start of employment, new staff are trained on storage, handling, labeling, and preparation of human milk during orientation. This also could be something that you do during professional development training each year, kind of a review of it for all staff, and as part of continuing education. So this is something, so that the how to me gives, you have to put a little bit more information about how often and how soon. So if you have a new person coming in, and who does this include? This might include lead staff. You may have a hierarchy of lead staff and assistant, or you may have 2 lead staff people in each classroom. But they all are part of that training. It may be that you even have a kitchen staff. You might have food preparation, depending on how large your program is. They are part of this training that they receive at the start of employment. They are also people who participate in the yearly continuing education training. So you might even specify what staff are. And as far as families are trained, that can be part of what we talked about earlier when you're doing your infant feeding plan. You can be providing parents with information on appropriate storage, labeling, and preparation of human milk. It's also something that you could be sending as part of a newsletter, a reminder, if you do paper newsletters or emails, those sort of things. So all of those could be put in there. And I was going to start typing, but I realized I can't type and talk. So,
well, go ahead and you type some of those things, and I'll look at the next one. How early educators develop the skills to support breastfeeding. And one of the things I think is one of the ways you develop the skills might be to watch the building blocks to breastfeeding friendly childcare that you're doing right now. I also think about if you have some of these same things, the emails, newsletters, if that's something that your staff is participating in. And one of the things we just talked about is how important that first person that you meet at a childcare center. I had an experience where we chose to choose a different childcare provider for my my oldest child was entering childcare, and I had a newborn. And I had asked, is it okay as I toured the facility if I bring my newborn? And they had said at this place there were no children that came through the tours because we were going to be going into the classroom. It didn't make sense for us to try to be separated. And the person on the phone didn't really understand about having a breastfed baby and a newborn in a sling is not the same thing as having, a 2-year-old running around. And just the way the staff person handled that conversation, as I called multiple childcare providers about bringing my newborn, made the difference between where we decided to go and our experience in that place. So when we think about how you train your early childhood educators to develop those skills, it's also important just to think about your whole staff.
During the development of the infant feeding plan, perhaps at orientation in the classroom, to the classroom, and through regular communications, however you do that. So I missed what I was not typing.
That's okay. I think we go ahead and I talked about it, but we'll pop in some language. Let's go to the next one. The process for family feedback about the program's breastfeeding support and promotion. I feel like this is the huge one when I talk to childcare providers that always stumps everyone. What is the process for family feedback? And a lot of them say, well, you just send us an email if you have a problem, and that's great. Kathleen, do you want to start just typing? Send us an email. Or was it down here? Send us an email. I'll move it up. I think one of the other important things oftentimes is to talk about the survey. A lot of childcare centers do surveys, end of year surveys, making sure that milk, human milk, preparation, those sorts of things are included in your survey is another method for family feedback. And oftentimes, I think one of the most difficult questions is anonymous feedback. This designation does not ask anonymous, but sometimes I've seen the previous versions where they wanted anonymous feedback, and I'm going, oh, that's so hard, right? Can you write a note and slip it under somebody's door? And I think being able to send a note to a childcare provider, an email, or a note is actually a really great way to communicate with your childcare providers, even though it's not anonymous. Can you email the teacher? And I know for some of you that are in very small centers, phone calls are available. After the kids are gone, it's difficult for teachers to talk on the phone while the kids are there. But we have had some marvelous childcare providers that always welcomed us to give calls if we were worried about anything outside of school hours. So I guess what's the process at your center?
Right. So you have lots of options for how you and it's basically it's the same way that you communicate about other things. How is things going in the classroom? And you also give the family the opportunity to give you feedback. How do you do that for the way you're handling other practices in the classroom? I think that that's really important, and think about those ways, and then put that information in there. Make sure that you're saying, well, we let them, our families can send us an email, or they can send an email. I see, I put the wrong, or we specifically request feedback. I love the idea of a survey that can be done anonymously too. You can have a box by the front door or someplace when they're able to come into the classroom. I know it's or into the building. It's a little harder right now. The important part about this is it's important to have this in your policy, because it can give parents the reassurance that they can can talk to you about how it's going, and it helps families feel better. But there is another beauty to this, and that is if you know that you're asking for feedback, when things aren't going right, you don't find out about it after it's been going badly for a while. And then all of a sudden you're getting an angry letter or an angry phone call, or the director gets a phone call because they don't like what they're have is happening in the class. Where if you were in constant communication, then this process becomes more two-way conversation. Parents sometimes don't understand something is going on, but when you share that, that's they can then feel more part of the process. So that's sort of the why you would want to do this. It's really important to get feedback from your families, but there are many ways to do it. And it's when do you check in exactly? Do you send emails? Do you pop a note in the backpack? What is your process? And give the family a chance to give feedback, because they're going to give feedback. They're going to give feedback, but it might be more stress at a more stressed time, and you don't want that kind of stress for anyone. You want to be doing what's best, of course,
Well,
for your family.
that's just such a really clever thing to say. I realize I mentioned before that I kind of come at this from the perspective of the parent. And I tell all of my friends that are having trouble with their kids, I say, I taught in public schools, and I always send, from the moment my child was born, I would send an email every 2 weeks. Friday morning, it was on my to-do list, send an email just saying, like, how's my little one doing? And to just try to get some information back. And I never realized that initiating that communication actually, that the teachers were able to alleviate some of my concerns right away so that they did not build. That's huge. Okay. Do we need to pop a little language up here on how to develop skills?
Yes, and I was going to go back. I'd had some ideas that I popped in a bunch
Oh,
of
go ahead.
places, but they was mostly about training, and how you would do. I'm going to pop in things that we've talked about before, and that would be step 2, which is all about training, and step 10, which is about um, how we support families through coordination and referral. So I'm going to pop that there. I don't know how these dots work right now, love. So how are your early educators developing the skills? How often are you being training? We talked about this before, but again, this is something that you would think about, and you can pop in here.
I love it.
And step 10, we train all our staff on the protection, promotion, and support of breastfeeding. And this includes the different trainings that are promoted and supported by the DCDE, or the designation, if you will. So some of those trainings you can think about. That's exactly what they're working on. So, and then those are the questions in red are how you're doing it. Are you doing virtual? Are they doing online at their time pace? Are you doing it part professional training, development training?
Perfect. I think we've covered that section. And of course, I also want to just mention that this is, if we've missed something, this is a great opportunity to reach out to your local technical assistant to ask questions. When we met with Jen from Beacon, she said she was planning to meet with Patty on next week, Friday, and they were going to go through and answer some of these questions. And so I always think this is a wonderful opportunity to just dive right in with your technical assistant. And I love this option because right here, what Kathleen and I are doing, we are not in the same house, and she's got her Google Doc open and I'm typing, and we're collaborating back and forth via Zoom. So that's a great option if you have any more questions in that area. So we finished part.
We're on to the all of we talked about up to now, what your policy looks like for your families. What does it look like for your employees, for your staff, for your teachers? And this is an extension, really, of all those welcoming and supportive behavior practices that you're using for families. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, so reasonable time to allow employees
Mhm.
to breastfeed or express milk as needed. And I think one of the things we talked about is, how much time is reasonable and what are the choices. So I always, when I talk to my friends, I always talk about, and a lot of places in North Carolina still have policies in place for smokers. And I always think you can at least pump as much as someone is allowed to smoke. Now, childcare first centers, that's not true so much anymore. But we still I think about those 15-minute breaks. Some parents might need a little bit longer than 15 minutes. They need enough time to get their parts out and get set up. But what does it look like in your child care center for those time for breaks? Um, could you bring your baby with you to just breastfeed? Um, I always think that that's the easiest thing to do. I was talking about bringing my little one in a sling. And I think about all of our shortages for childcare providers right now, how enticing it would be to be looking for a new job where they said, just if you can just bring your baby with you. Kathleen, were you saying that at least in the years past that wasn't part of your ratio numbers, having a nursing little one?
And it's been a while. I'm not an expert on this, but it would be an important to, I think, or helpful to look this up. If your teacher is wearing the baby in a sling, which is what I was going to write there, um, then that teacher is still present in the classroom. You may want to see if that qualifies for keeping your teacher student ratios. That's, I think, because that is a very difficult part of it. That's the balance of how do you keep the ratios within the required ratios and the ratios that are good for best practice. And so I would definitely check that out with your TA, your technical advisor, on whether this is something that person can do, because it benefits the baby as well as the teacher in the long run, as well as benefiting you and your program. But I would check. I want to put wear the infant in a sling. So hands are free, right?
Mm-hmm. And I love some of the suggestions that you popped in here about just break time for teachers. Can you bring your baby with you to class? These are great questions. I popped in just a little more language here while you were talking about just restating breastfeeding employees are provided reasonable time to express their milk. That's the policy. It's that simple. Employees are welcomed and to continue to provide milk for their infants after returning to work. It's just some of those basics.
And you may want to say, I hear you, brother, yeah, employees should notify. And I suspect it's nice to know in advance, right? So the employee should notify you that the baby will be coming so that you can work on that together and make it work as a program.
What are breastfeeding employees allowed to? And I always feel like one of the sentences here, Kathleen, you might want to pop it in, is that you meet with after notification, you meet with each employee to develop a personal plan that meets the needs of that parent. And it's reevaluated every 6 weeks or every period of time. Because people always say, well, how should we do this? And they're trying to figure it out. And we know that the needs of each parent is different. And those teachers in your classroom are the experts on what they need and what their family needs, what their students need. They may be able to just help you come up with these solutions.
Depending on your program, you can make a decision how often you want to do that. The language here that you can use. So.
Access to breastfeeding friendly space other than a bathroom. I think this is, again, one of those places where you could just write it out explicitly. At Anderson Child Care Center, we ensure that lactating employees have access to a space. And then you can just talk about these spaces. I remember Jen from Beacon on the last call. She said that they had a space, but it wasn't very nice. And she's trying to upgrade her office, which I think is fantastic. But I also think that you're able to just talk about, what are the accommodations you currently have, even if it's not perfect.
It could be perhaps employees can use, if you have the only space there is your office, that may be a place you can work on, with them so they can use that space to express their milk. Maybe they can express their milk in the space you have, in a space for you're accommodating your families. And then when families are not in the building, that space may be available also for your staff to use, because you've already made that space that isn't the bathroom, perhaps you can use it in for more throughout the day for staff as well as families.
And so I always think about, you feel free to watch the other building block session on space, because we've done a whole workshop on talking about how to fit a space. And I love some of the childcare centers that actually just integrated in a curtained off area for lactation. And I'm thinking that's so clever. That's such a clever use. But I also think when we talk about a space, right, we want to create an environment where families, and I mean, it would be great employees if they're allowed to bring that baby and are welcome to breastfeed everywhere, but the space and the privacy are for pumping. We don't want, pumping, you've got to pull all your body parts out, pull out all the pump pieces, lay them out someplace clean where toddlers aren't grabbing them, and be able to put those on your body. So that when we think about this space, I always think, instead of using the word breastfeeding friendly, I would say lactation friendly, because to me it's about expressing that milk, and families can breastfeed everywhere.
Right. I missed some of that. I was putting this down, but right, the breastfeeding part does not need the room as much as you may when you're expressing milk.
Yes, expressing milk is tricky. And I'll let Kathleen type and I'll just talk for a second. And I always think I struggled as a parent to be able to breastfeed, be able to lactate at work. I always had to get out my phone. I recorded the cries of my little one, his hungry cry, so that I could hear it. And that would be able to help me have my letdown and my little woo-saw moment where I'm going, okay, here we go, I'm about to pump. Which is hard when you're a teacher in the classroom and you're running, you're go, 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 trying to think about everybody else's needs. It's really hard to take that time to sit down and express your milk.
Right. So you want to have, maybe you have a little table in there, even though it's not part of the requireds, but it might be just a space to put that picture there, of your little one to help you. So now this is the end of the required for the policy, love. So what it does say at the end, and there are 3 checks, that one of them will be that the policy includes your child care facility's name. We added that at the beginning, so you can check that off. Does it address all required topics? Because the topics were actually embedded in this document, they should be addressed. You have addressed them. And next is you want to put something down about a date. And I didn't know quite how that would look to everybody, but I was thinking of some ideas of what you would like to put in there. And you definitely want to make sure that you have, when was it adopted? What date was it adopted? Then you want to have space though about reviewing, because you do want to look at it annually. It may not be revised every year, but you definitely want to review it to make sure that it still says what you hope to say. And you'll probably find that by using this policy that, oh gosh, I wished we had done something else, added this little bit, or we haven't really accommodated families in this way. So then you can add that in the next year, or even before that next year, whenever you are revising it, but at least annually to look at it. Okay. So I popped those in right away, thinking for 3 years you've looked at your policy, you've reviewed it, and you've revised it if you need it.
Okay. So do we want to take do you want to take a few minutes and kind of start to clean this up? I always, the one thing I noticed is we didn't start with a statement around for employees. We talked about why we want to support families, but we didn't talk explicitly about, why is our child care center really passionate about having a space for employees, and really highlighting that.
So I popped in. Now, the purpose of the policy is to ensure that we provide welcome, encouragement, and support so that
Perfect.
families and employees can continue to breastfeed. Good point, love. We want to make sure that this is for all, exactly at the time. So you can say, our Child Development Center recommends for the breastfeeding for the child, the mother, the family, and you can say, and for our child care center, our staff. You can put that in there, and our child development community. That may be a little bit more than we'd want to say. It's not required, but it's something that we might want to think about the implications, the general health of your child care program community.
Okay, so I think that we have our outline. And so for those of you who saw video 1, Kathleen is going to share a document where she's typed up these requirements as listed from the state designation team, but it may not necessarily have all of the pieces that we wrote. So one of the things I wanted to remind everyone that you can go onto CGBI's website and you can find those 10 steps. But if you dig deep in there, they actually have the additional 10 steps with all the bullet points, 1.1, the 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, as well as some of the other building blocks Shauna actually put together and shared all of those detailed documents. And hopefully that will get shared again so that you can think for your childcare center, how did you bring in each one of these pieces? And we've highlighted sensitivity. It's all of those pieces that we've talked about instead of giving you the writing so that you can create on your own the policy that's the right fit for your center. Does that make sense, Kathleen?
Yes, this is like a review of what we did. Well, what we were showing you before is the actual questions and what do you do? It's like it's not a blank sheet of paper. Luckily, you have some questions. And I think if you look at these slides, you're going to be able to grab some language, get some language that you can pop in there that works for you. I think Love says, start writing in your own words about these ideas. And that's the important part. It has to reflect where you are in your program, and think about, how do we do this? How do we make it breastfeeding friendly? So yeah, I think this is good. This is a second way of looking at it now.
Mm-hmm. And I also I highlighted here about promoting exclusive breastfeeding. I think one of the parts we talked about last time is it's important to promote breastfeeding, but one of the places that one of the designation pieces to be designated is you have to talk about exclusive breastfeeding. Exclusive breastfeeding means you're going to say to that parent, you are doing such a good job. Just keep doing what you're doing, and all this baby is going to need is your love and attention, and you will get through this. And we're going to be here to support you. So they're going to look for something like some kind of language around how you support exclusive breastfeeding, if that's the desire of the family.
And knowing that you don't need water even in the middle of summer, that that breast milk has much water in it, enough for baby.
And let me be clear, Jen mentioned that in her childcare center, and I think this is the rules in many places, that you can't add without a doctor's note. Thank you. We want to thank all of our community partners that have been here along the way. And Natasha's going to go ahead and pop up. We'll have a slide so that you can fill out that post-evaluation to receive full credit for this presentation. And we could not have done this without the Buncombe County Partnership from Natasha. Kathleen and I are from Breastfeeding Family Friendly Communities. Kathleen manages Orange County, and I'm Durham, and Rich and Patty from Randolph County. All of our community partners have done an incredible job in making this process work. Thank you so much.